Okay, good evening everybody. We'll make a start. So my name's Margie and I'm going to give a little talk tonight and we'll do some meditation together and then we'll have some questions at the end as well. So we can begin tonight with a motivation. So from a Buddhist perspective, the motivation is really important. Even probably in all of our activities in life, how we motivate, how we set out the intention that we have to do a task or undergo an experience is really important. From a Buddhist perspective, this intention creates the energy or the karma of the activity. So intention, motivation is really, really important. It's everything, really. So for meditation practice, the kind of motivation that we want to have, is, I guess we want to, our intention of doing meditation is really to be happy. You know, that's why we do it. So, but then we have to check with ourselves about what do we mean by happiness. And I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost in our purpose for meditation and our purpose for engaging in meditation practice. So what does to be happy mean? And so from a spiritual point of view especially, and you know, meditation, whatever you mean by spiritual, I guess, is happiness not in the worldly sense, so not in the rich and famous sense of happiness, but in the more intrinsic kind of happiness, a natural kind of happiness within one's own mind. So at the very least, that's why we should be doing meditation, and we should be aware that's why we're doing meditation, you know, and really set that motivation. An important part of at least Buddhist motivation is also having an aspirational aspect to it. So you're aspiring to do or be something, you know, maybe greater than yourselves. And that can be to your full potential, or it can be in the spiritual sense of enlightenment. And that aspiration comes from especially a Mahayana Buddhist point of view, is may I be happy, and may others be happy, and may I be able to help others to be happy. So it has that altruistic aspect of not just wishing something for oneself, but also wishing something for others, or the same really. You're not wishing anything different from others than what you would wish for yourself, which is a very simple but a very profound point. So that, you know, your happiness is as important as somebody else, others' happiness. And really that altruistic mind, that is what spirituality is, regardless of religion or your background or whoever. There's a sense of altruism, wishing others to be happy and doing it not just for oneself. So we'll take a minute just to set that motivation. So in your own way, you can set your motivation yourself, your personal, what happiness means to you from a non-worldly point of view, and some aspiration you would like to set. So that's good. So if we've set our motivation, then we can be guaranteed that there's a benefit for coming here tonight for yourself and for others. So this idea of an altruistic wish or doing something for others as opposed to doing something solely for oneself. And that's something we can examine tonight, because it needs to be examined, because I think, on the face of it, we do spend our lives full of worries and concerns, ambitions and desires, plans that do concern ourselves, or our family or our immediate sphere, I guess, who we have responsibility for. But often it's ourselves, it's driven from our own point of view. And, again, that's very reasonable. That's kind of how the world works. We're all responsible for our own lives and the lives of our children or loved ones. But it's examining how we're going about that. What are we meaning? What are we really getting at? What are we really achieving, that kind of happiness? Because all of our energy goes into this goal of happiness, but is it always delivering? And then if it isn't, what is causing the suffering or the pain or the discontentment or dissatisfaction? So that's something we can examine. So from a Buddhist point of view, we would say what is causing a lot of our dissatisfaction and our problems is that if we're solely concerned with a really happiness that comes from an external source, an external environment, then we tend to create a lot of craving and grasping within our minds. So that source of happiness that is external to myself becomes a source of craving. So we start to crave that object, start to crave that idea of happiness that object is going to give to us. And that can be a person, it can be an experience or a thing, it's just an object. And from that craving, we have this mind of grasping. So it grasps onto that object. And it grasps on so tightly to that object. And then what happens? So a whole lot of things can happen, I guess. Sometimes you do get a happiness for a little while. Sometimes you get disappointment. So the more unrealistic expectations we set on that external object to provide me with happiness, often what happens then, and we have that strong craving and grasping, from this basis then can arise the delusions within our mind. So from the main delusions from a Buddhist point of view are the attachment, so wanting more. So attachment is this really the craving, grasping, that attachment to that idea that object will give you happiness. Anger, ignorance, pride and jealousy. So they're the main delusions that will arise in one's mind when you become fixated on an external object with this promise of happiness or satisfaction. And then, from those minds you can have vengeance and spite, envy and cruelty. I'm listing them. These are all listed in the Buddhist text. Avarice, dullness, laziness, pretension, dishonesty, inconsideration and pretension. So they're actually listed out that these become minds, mental states that arise in our mind, all in this cycle of this idea of an object giving us happiness and craving and grasping for that object, the object failing in some way to live up to that happiness. And then from those, all sorts of mental states will arise. And we know it ourselves, if we have a strong attachment to somebody and then that person happens to talk to another somebody, very quickly jealousy can arise. So we would say that person we have attachment for is something that gives me happiness. That's when we have a strong attachment to somebody, we would say that person, I'm attached to that person because they can deliver me a level of happiness. And we have an expectation that that person will do that. But it doesn't take very much for that person, based on that person's actions, which seem quite harmless, that person might just choose to speak to somebody, that jealousy will arise in one's mind. So I think we could all agree that jealousy is not a state of happiness. Jealousy is quite uncomfortable feeling, really. So then something that we said that was going to cause us, something we identified that was the cause of our happiness, has very quickly, easily turned into the cause of some suffering in our mind. And again, this because all of our happiness is totally externalised. Now, that's not to say that our happiness doesn't come from external objects. Because, we do experience the world through our sense organs. That's how we do experience the world. But it's the craving and the grasping and the unrealistic expectations of that external object to deliver you a level of happiness that's beyond realistic, relying on that object, person, object or thing. And then when it fails to live up to it because it talks to somebody else or because it's no longer that interested in you, or, you get bored with it, that then great suffering will arise. So then we have to, really question what is that state of happiness we were expecting from that object, and is it realistic? And why did it fail us in that sense? So, because we would usually say that happiness is happiness is a contented or pleasant feeling, but it is determined by that experience or that object. If we go to a great party, that was great. I felt happy. It was a fantastic night. So we have this momentariness of happiness, and then we again crave for that happiness again, and then maybe the next Friday night you try and relive it, and due to expectations and all things, it didn't live up to it. So there's a comparison of happiness, and then actually it was a waste of my time, and it was really boring and whatever. So we are always setting ourselves up in a way to fail when it comes to that, expecting happiness to come from that external source all of the time. So from another way to look at happiness is to say that happiness is a state of mind. And happiness itself could be seen as a virtuous or a positive state of mind that naturally arises within one's mind when one's mind is free of grasping, craving and grasping. When one's mind is free of all those attachments and jealousies and hatreds and spitefulness and all of those other laziness. So it's when we don't have those things in our mind that then the mind will naturally arise in a state of happiness. Because our minds themselves, left without all those craving, grasping and all those delusions, the mind is actually naturally peaceful and naturally happy. So the happiness we experience when we do have a good time with friends, with loved ones, when we get a kick out of achieving something and we have a moment of happiness, that actually has come from your positive effort or some positiveness that you've created. But we get tricked into thinking it's the craving and the grasping that is part of that happiness. And that's something that we really need to really try and understand for ourselves. Because, of course, happiness will come from having great friends, having a great partner. But it won't come from the jealousy or the envy or the spitefulness. Those things only will come on from the craving and the false expectation, and they will block the happiness. So that's something that we have to really start to examine and see for ourselves. Because in that way, our so-called happiness that we chase so hard for, all we find out is just misery and pain. And then we'll find ourselves depressed and felt let down by all our worldly efforts of trying to be happy. So really, the real way to be happy is to just let go and be happy in that sense. And I found this quote actually that I thought explained it quite well from one of the whispered mind training texts. So these are the texts that help you develop the mind to turn things around, to lessen the craving and grasping, and to train in that altruistic state of mind. So it says, if you can tolerate anything, then whatever you do brings happiness. So if you can tolerate anything, whatever you do brings happiness. So again, that's completely the opposite to how we would usually think. You know, if we don't get our needs met now and perfectly and on time and when we want it, then that's automatically a reason for us to be unhappy. And in our mind, a whole lot of unhappiness arises, and we spend a lot of time justifying that unhappiness. But it's actually this state of tolerance, to be able to understand that it's not the external, it's not what somebody says or does or doesn't do to you that causes your happiness. It's the very natural mind, the very natural state of your mind of peace, which is your happiness. So, again, trying to understand what that means, that, yeah, despite somebody cutting you off in traffic or flirting with somebody else or getting the job that you wanted or all of those things that happen in life, despite all of that, if you can tolerate anything, whatever you do brings happiness. So it's, that's really turned how we always search for happiness, search for happiness, search for happiness, externally. So we forget to look for the happiness that can just naturally arise. And again, it's not saying that we shouldn't be, have an expectation or enjoy a good meal or enjoy good friends. That's just life. That's how we engage our lives, and we do have our senses to enjoy them. But it's just that expectation. It's the level of craving. It's the level of grasping. And when those become huge in your mind, then you will notice you will be unhappy. You will cause suffering. So to take this step further from a more, spiritual point of view or a Buddhist point of view, we can, the step further really is to say that happiness comes from benefiting others, and we kind of alluded to that in the meditation. And this is another Kadampa quote that I found that kind of, again, it explains one way to act. It's kind of the opposite to how we always act. So, a true spiritual yogi would, I proclaim my faults and not seek faults in others. And I hide my own good qualities, but praise those of others. So I proclaim my faults. So generally we proclaim the faults of others. And when we have a gossip with somebody, generally that's talking about somebody else's faults. And not seeing faults in others, So, and basically, so we proclaim our own faults. So be very aware of our own areas for improvement is what that's saying. And so I hide my own good qualities but praise those of others. And generally we tout our own good qualities quite readily, and we don't like to talk too much about the good qualities of others. So again, by thinking about how we naturally, what we naturally do, the kind of gossiping or the kind of self-promotion that we engage in, you know, how is that really helping us to be happy? Because we do that with the idea to be happy. I mean, if you're proclaiming your own greatness, your qualities, and not have no awareness of some of your own faults, then you're doing that because you think that's going to help make you be happy or make other people recognise how great you are, and that kind of will give you some kind of that feeling of praise, kind of building you up. So again, this is again how we naturally are in the world, but again, how is that helping us? And then when we think of that idea of putting ourselves lower and praising somebody else up, and hiding our own good qualities in the way that we could make somebody else shine, or that, again, it seems to be against how we would normally think. But actually, by doing this, what it does is actually lessen that craving and lessen that grasping in the mind. Because what it's doing is that whole self-importance, that whole ego-driven desire for my happiness from an external source is naturally reduced. So it's a technique, really. This little 2 lines is a technique to use it to lessen your own desire and craving in your mind. Because if you're touting how wonderful I am, gee, I'm so great, you know, and talking about, did you see what that person did? Basically what you're doing is you're trying to find some happiness in status or in some kind of recognition. But that's a kind of craving, because that is craving. You're craving for some kind of recognition. And then when you don't get it, then you feel you need to do it more and more. And then you get a lot of inflated pride, get quite upset or pretentious. I think that was one of the non-virtues. So this idea of being really aware of one's faults so you can work on them, and not praising yourself up, is actually lessening the craving in one's mind. But then by taking that next step to praise others and to hide one's qualities is starting to it's starting to benefit others as well. So you can use it as that practice for benefiting others. So these kinds of practice then are trying to lessen that ego, the ego grasping, and to develop this idea of a loving kindness. So again, we said natural happiness will arise if your mind isn't full of the craving and the grasping, if it isn't blinded by all the delusions arising in it. Happiness will come. And especially if one's happiness comes if one develops this mind of trying to cultivate a mind of loving others and loving, of basing it on kindness, loving kindness. And again, if you think of the happiness you have in life, it's generally because there's somebody you love or have loved in your life that you have that warm feeling towards, and that feeling of love. You know, it's a very nice, warm feeling. And that does bring a sense of happiness. So that feeling itself, once you then start, I need that from somebody else, I need that from external, again, you've just killed that with craving and grasping. But to really feel that feeling of love, because that's in your own mind, that's your mind. And if that's based on somebody externally, and then trying to cultivate that feeling, because that feeling is in your mind, and it's your mind that is experiencing the happiness. And that's happening dependent on your experience with somebody, but they're not giving you anything at that point. You do not have any expectation from them at that point. You're just cultivating a mind of love, and then you're sharing that mind of love with no expectation, no craving, no grasping. So that's why in spiritual practice or meditation, this idea of just even sitting down and cultivating this feeling of love for others, for oneself and for others, is very powerful. Because within that activity, in that action that you're doing for yourself, you're generating really positive, you're generating that positive energy then your mind is imbued with that. And then when you step out your front door, life feels a little okay, and the expectation and the craving and the grasping and the unrealistic needs are subdued somewhat. And again, back to that quote, if you've got love, if you've got love, you can tolerate. So if you can tolerate anything, your mind's not disturbed, then you have happiness. Or if you have love in your mind, you can then tolerate anything. Because love is your experience, and you've generated that from your own side. And so the reason why we have this misconception of the external world's ability to please myself, to please me, is that we hold this idea of me, this I, me, incorrectly within our minds. And this is an innate sense. It's not that we woke up one day and we did this. We're inborn with a kind of innate sense of holding on to our I as a really permanent, independent entity, And it's this permanent, independent entity of I, Margie, in my case, that is really the driver of that craving and grasping. So the more we can let go of that a little bit and release that and not feed it through more craving and grasping, the more space we can get to not be driven, to allow our natural minds of love and compassion to sort of grow and to cultivate them. So this really strong sense of I that doesn't want to suffer, that wants that happiness, but doesn't really know how to go after it. So it's really, this idea of examining what is that? What is this sense of I that seems so permanent and independent and driving us? And it's not that from a Buddhist perspective, it's not that the I doesn't exist, that there is no I. I'm sitting here and I can say I'm Margie, so I'm definitely existing. So it's not this idea of there is no I, this nihilistic point of view, but it's just how does that I exist? And it does exist in this idea of it is dependent. It's not independent. It's not permanent. It's a dependent aspect. So it is really this misconception, and this misconception, which is innate, then drives more and more misconceptions within our lives. It drives more and more craving and grasping, and drives more delusions to arise, which then causes our suffering. And so this is why we can find it really hard to think of somebody else above ourselves, because we've got this sense of this permanent, independent I that's driving our need for happiness. So that, again, examine if that's really true, or is cultivating the idea of love and just contentment within one's own mind enough? Because that permanent I will never be satisfied if there will never be enough money, enough fame, enough sensory experience to satisfy that I. but to cultivate a mind of love and contentment, which is free, and one that considers others as important of love and contentment as you are, equal in that. And that, you know, and to share then that feeling. You know, you can, if you think about it, you can feel it yourself. You can feel how that starts to feel for you. So again, through meditation, it's worth examining how these concepts how they play out in your life. So we'll do some meditation now. So with this meditation, I thought we would just spend some time trying to observe our minds and to just let the arisal of what comes up to our minds and just observe what's happening without getting involved in the story or the drama of what's in our mind. And depending on how much meditation you do and how often, you know, so that's the idea, is to be able to rest the mind in that peaceful state, to be able to just rest that mind there. So we'll have a go at doing that. Again, you know, the mind is a fickle thing, so the mind might get bored, or the mind might start going through the shopping list, or start thinking about what it has to do tomorrow, or what it did today and didn't do well or not well, or whatever, things like that. So that, I mean, that's part of meditation, depending on how you're feeling on that day or how you are. So if those things happen, that's fine. Just make sure you notice that those things arising within your mind, and just say, just let it go, you know, just let them go. So again, and then take yourself back to just observing the mind. And let the thoughts come, and the thoughts will always come into the mind. You know, the mind conceptualizes thoughts, that's what it does. So when a thought comes, again, don't freak out. That's just the mind conceptualizing, going through its thing. Again, try not to get involved and thinking about it and you know, writing a shopping list and things like that. So really that's, and then try and rest that mind in that spacious awareness that you're creating, and let the thoughts come and go. The thoughts are fine. What I'll do is we'll do the meditation for a few minutes, and then I'll just stop it. So if you are having a bad day and your thoughts are all crazy, you've got a bit of time to think, okay, I'm going to start again, and then you can go again. So it's good to just do little short breaks, and then you can review if you want. Oh yeah, I got caught up. Or if you just, and reset yourself a little bit. So again, and it's okay to find out what's happening in your mind, you know, that's fine, to be really aware and to be present with what's happening in your mind. And at the beginning that can be, you know, there's a lot going on there sometimes, you know. It can be racing and it can be very hard to settle. So that's why we'll have some little breaks. So if that's where you're at today, then you can just take some time to try and settle, and then relax, just relax, have a few minutes, and then settle again. If you're having a particularly good meditation, then try and ignore me, sorry. But again, for beginners, it's better not to just sit in 10 minutes of poor meditation, because then every time you sit in meditation, it'll be a bad meditation. You'll train your mind for a bad meditation or a distracted meditation. So meditation's really about, we just want to calm the mind and still the mind and allow, rest it in its awareness, and let the thoughts come and go, not to be engaged in the dialogue of the mind. You know, that's not the meditation for this meditation. We're not doing analytical, it's just very much in the space of the mind. So first just sit in a comfortable position. Have your deep breaths and relax physically, so it's good to start physically relaxed. Loosen your shoulders and your jaw, your facial muscles. Take some deep breaths and feel that you're clearing away all today's troubles, concerns, excitements. Now if you want, have a little break and review your meditation. Notice if you got caught up in your shopping list. So don't judge your meditation as good or bad, just say it is what it was. If you've got cramp or you're a bit uncomfortable, wriggle around. Okay. So again, set the intention that you're going to meditate for the next 3 minutes. Again, just sitting with your mind, just allowing your mind to relax, staying very aware of your mind. Allowing thoughts to come and go. If you want, you can follow your breath if you find that easier, to anchor your mind. Okay, we can come out of that meditation. So interesting, we can also set ourselves up for our meditation with craving and grasping and expectation. And so we have to be careful as well with even our meditation that we don't turn that into an object to bring us happiness, only to bring us suffering when it lets us down. So, too much expectation. It's not a great thing. So, does anyone have any questions from tonight's talk? Yep.
When we talk about getting rid of the craving in our life, is that what Buddhism means when we talk about emptiness? Happiness, emptiness?
No, emptiness is more about the idea of the misconception of the I, which I mentioned nearer to the end. So in the fact that innately we believe we have a permanent, independent I. In Buddhism would say, in fact, we are empty of having a permanent, independent I. So we have an I that's dependent upon body and mind, but it's not other than that. Yeah.
How do we form relationships, like friendships or romantic relationships, without this attachment?
Good question. Look, to some degree we can't. We'll always have an element of attachment. So it's about degrees. So it's sort of like if one part of the scale is love, pure love that we talk about generating in our heart, and the other scale is attachment. If this is high, this is low, the relationship's generally a train wreck. If this is high, this is low, is generally a loving relationship that can endure lots of lives, whatever lives, the tolerance quote. If you can tolerate anything, your mind will be happy. So we'll always have some level of attachment. It is because of this innate I. Our ego will always play into our lives. We will always have an element of anger and jealousy and attachment and pride. So it's about recognising that they're the problem, and having love and non-craving, non-grasping, and reducing those states of mind is the answer. So it's just a rebalancing. So if you're really depressed and unhappy, you're probably like that. So it's just about rebalancing our perspective, and that's what meditation does. It gives you that ability to do that. Yep.
Is it easier to make others happier than yourself? Because sometimes you overdo the self-happiness thing.
Good question. I don't know. I think mothers probably say they spend their whole time making everybody else happy themselves. I think innately even if we don't know about it, if you sit and meditate analytically on everything I do today, how was it really sort of deeply motivated by this idea that somehow I was going to get something out of it. Somehow it fit a belief, a value, a kind of ambition, So I think innately we are always doing it for ourselves. Even being a good person sometimes, can be... But, I think the idea of mind training is putting others first. And I think mothers often do that with young babies. They have to forego their own sleep to ensure the child is fed or changed or things like that. So, and often and not always, but, sometimes that can even bring joy to the mother. This idea of caring for somebody can be a very joyous state of mind. So it's just... you know, but she's doing it, you know, so it's just understanding, it's just really examining, I think, you know. But I don't know, that again, I think it's, what do we mean, what are we doing, I don't know. But I think ultimately it's easy to make others happy, and then you'll end up happy, ultimately, if you get to that point, yeah. If you're always thinking doing for others, you're reducing your ego, then, you know, the idea is that you will be happy. But not to be a doormat. I'm not, you know, we can't go out and we've got limitations and we've got needs. So it's all in, it's a balance as well. You know, you've just got to, it's like that idea of getting the balance right, you know, at our stage. I mean, you know, I think His Holiness spends all his life doing things for others. So it's possible, you know, that's the ideal. But, you know.
The reason why I ask is
Mm.
you never seem to, if you focus on yourself,
Mm.
try and make yourself happy, you'll never be permanently happy.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but it seems like if you focus on other people,
Mm.
it's an easier
Yeah.
avenue. That's the only reason why I
Yeah, I think so. You know, that's and that's the spiritual practice. You know, that contentment. I mean, that's the mind of contentment, not looking for happiness. You are content. I'm happy. You know, that's all we have to say. I'm happy. Nobody says we needed this, 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 and this to be happy. Nothing's stopping us from saying I'm happy. No. You know, but we never do, because our minds have got too much craving in them. But that will bring me happiness, and we've got a plan, or we've got an agenda or an ambition. And those things are fine, you know, and ambition's fine, but it's just, again, that balance and checking yourself. Yeah. But yeah, I would agree. But not always easy, but yeah.
But what, the reason why I was asking, is there a better focus than just saying, you know, my main goal is I want to be happy? Can that be like a bit of a destructive thing? Because you're still sort of focusing on yourself and not focusing on something that takes your focus off yourself. And in turn it sort of helps you realise a bit better.
Yeah, working for the benefit of others from a Mahayana point of view, a Buddhist Mahayana point of view, would be that you work for the benefit of the others. And working for the benefit of others actually brings one happiness, because you're generating love and compassion. And again, like I tried to explain tonight, actually love and compassion is a mental state within your mind. If you have love for your child or your partner and your family, you know there's a certain amount of good feeling that comes with that. So if you can generate that for everybody, and in that way be useful to those people, you know, the idea is that's a lot of love, it's a lot of good feeling within one's mind. So that's the idea. You know, but we've all got limitations to how much we can physically help people, but mentally we can actually generate minds of love and compassion for everybody. Yeah. But I think also, you know, innately we don't want to suffer. Nobody wants to suffer, you know. That's the idea, and I guess that idea of not suffering is a kind of happiness as well that we chase. Because you will never meet anybody who says, "Oh, I'd like to suffer," you know. Or, you know, so that's just in that way we're all driven to at least that sort of happiness, free from suffering kind of happiness. And again, that logic's pretty clear when you think about that, you know. So, yes.
Something's happened to me today. I got spanked or something.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of angry.
Yep.
But in meditation itself, I could feel that coming in the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
To change that thought, you know, because I'm affected, obviously, it sits there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sort of thinking, what do you do to change it? Like, I'm trying to say, well, I just send love to them. Like, I've got to put down the mental pattern.
Mm.
And what is it you do sometimes to put that down? Like, what is it that comes in? Is it like I'm saying, oh, I'll just change that?
Well, you don't really have to change it, you just observe it. I mean, you know, that's your mind conceptualising, something happened today, and then your mind's still remembering it, and it's then replaying that back to you in your thinking, in your thoughts. That's normal and natural. If the meditation is what this mind was to rest the mind in awareness and not, you know, examine that thing, then like anything will come to your mind. So all you have to do is then let that go. You know, try not to engage that. And change, what do you mean by change it? You said to...
Yeah, I'm seeing the mechanism to, like, there's an emotional hangover from when something makes you angry. It's
Yeah.
pushback. So I do wish them well, because it's a
Yeah.
somebody
Yeah.
close to my family. But the best thing I can do is push back.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the resting my mind, it's like that mechanism change is like to not let it capture me and to move into the rested state. I'm just...
Yeah. So that's just your mind pulling you towards something, you know. It's got to have a strong pull. So the more you then just allow it to disappear, you know, then it hasn't got that power over you anymore.
What allows it to disappear? Like, is it another conscious...
No. It itself, it's a thought. It's only a thought. It's not permanent. It will disappear naturally. So it only stays around because we keep adding... We keep meeting it, we keep concentrating on it, we keep thinking about it. So we're keeping the loop by engaging it. But if you ignore it, it eventually will fade away. That's all it can do. A thought will rise, a thought will fade, a thought will rise, a thought will fade.
So is it a conscious thing you sit there and go, I am here, I am now? It's sort of...
Well, you can, if that's going to work for you. Yep, anything that works to help you just let go and not engage it. Just say, you know, if that's going to say, well, it'll fade away if I don't, you know, concentrate on it. It's just understanding it, I think, more. So don't try and change it, because as soon as you change it, you've already got hold of it and it's got hold of you. Yeah. So, yeah, just that let go of it, yeah. Yeah. Sounds like you handled it well, so... Yeah, you can move on. Yeah. Any other questions?
Similar to the lady on the other side of the room, I think it's relatively straightforward to develop that sort of love and compassion and the want for people that you care about. But the strategies to develop that towards people that perhaps irritate you or annoy you or are difficult towards you, definitely try my best to do that. I feel that's important
Yeah.
in the way that they see me. Not that the way someone sees me is the most important thing, but do you know what I mean? But you know, those strategies to try and feel that you want to be loving and caring and compassionate towards someone that isn't someone that you care very much for.
So again, meditation is a mental activity. So, you know, imagining them in front of you and sending them love, generating that love and sending them love, you know, that's generating love, and you're sending it to somebody who is a suffering being. So you don't worry about the judgments or what happened or what they've done to you. Basically, it's valid to think, you know, that one way to engender that sense of compassion is their level of suffering. You know, think of the level of delusions that are in their mind or their level of attachment, so that all their relationships turn quite toxic. They're quite spiteful or they're harmful or they lack in insight. You know, so think of that, and that causes them suffering and that causes them pain, you know. And how lucky I am. You know, I don't seem to have that level of problems. I'm so lucky, you know. So on that basis you can generate love for them and imagine them in front of you and then send them that love on that basis. So you don't have to get involved and, you know, they did that to me. You don't have to personalise it. It's that idea of equalising it. You know, they're suffering. So it's that acknowledgement of their suffering that can be the basis of your compassion. And it's a lot easier, I think, then to generate some kind of love. And again, this is a mental exercise that you're generating love and sending it to them. Which is really, like you said, it can be real challenging. So just think of what you're doing mentally to yourself, the benefit. If you can overcome this urge to feel annoyance at the least and hatred at the best towards them, you know, you can see why it's powerful for you. They've still got all their problems, but you've generated this mind that can overcome your own mind of not liking them because of the way you've judged them to act towards you. Very powerful for you. And then when you come across them, of course you'll naturally be more kind and compassionate because you'll have a deeper sense of appreciation for their suffering. A little bit less just judgmental, maybe tiptoe around them a bit. You know, keep things on the nice, non-harming. So it benefits them, but you are the real winner. You know, you are the real winner of love. You know, so, and again, because think of the power of your mind to do that. And, you know, so then your mind becomes very powerful and easily feels love and easily feels relaxed around people. And yeah, so it's a good meditation. It's a really good meditation to do. Okay. Okay, so we can finish if there's no more questions. So we'll just do a quick dedication meditation. So we start with motivation, we end with dedication. So as motivation, set the intention. We're going to do these, come to this talk and learn about meditation for our own true altruistic sense of happiness and to benefit others. Now, all of that good, we call wisdom and love we've generated, we now dedicate. So we send that positive energy out to ourselves and out to everybody. And that way it multiplies. Okay, so again, just quickly relax the body. And we're going to do this meditation with our breathing. So just notice your breath. And as you inhale, you visualize that all of the good qualities and love and compassion and altruistic intention of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and all holy beings, whoever they are, enter into your left nostril in the aspect of white light. And as this light enters into you, it increases and it increases your positive mental mind states. And it imbues them with love and compassion. So again, feel going into your heart, this love, and from your heart radiating out throughout your whole body. And when you exhale, imagine all of the negative qualities, all of those horrible delusions we all have, all our disturbed mental states, all of the things that cause our suffering, our own ego attachments. Imagine you're breathing them out. And they're dispelled and completely disappear. So you can do a few rounds of inhaling all of the love and good qualities of the Buddhas, holy beings, and exhaling all of those your own negative mind states that are unhelpful to you or others. Okay, thank you everybody.